Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Micah, the prophecy of Micah. Now, Micah's prophecy, he's a contemporary of Isaiah the prophet, so his prophecies around the time of Hezekiah. And his prophecy focuses on both Samaria and Jerusalem, the capital cities, um, and how close their each judgments are. So let's get into it. Um, Chapter 4, verse 1 says, "In the last days." Now stop, because this is very interesting, because remember, um, when we talk about Micah's prophecy, okay, and notice how early on, as far as history is concerned, let me do this, pull up my Bible timeline here. Um, 35, I think it's around Micah's time. Where you at, Micah? I don't know why I always have a, so right around here. Um, Let me do this. So I want you to see the timeline. So this is Micah, right? 735 BC, so 700 years before Jesus, and just a little over 100 years before the fall of Jerusalem. Okay, and notice he uses the phrase "last days," the last days. Okay, so from this point, these are not the last days during this time. Technically, the last days begin when Jesus appeared, which is a long day. So, since Jesus has been around 2,000 years. Now, the last days then is not just only a time. In other words, when we say the last day of the sale, right? So the sale is from this date to that date. And then if you say the last day of that sale, it literally means the last day. But here, the last days is usually a period of time. And there's a lot of things that happen in the last days. For example, the coming of Jesus, both the first and second, and then also the judgments in the end times all can fit into the last days. So he says, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house will be established, and the tops of the mountains will be raised above the hills, and people will stream to it. And many nations will come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us about his ways, so we may walk in his path. For instruction will go out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Now, this is very interesting, very specific prophecy here. The last days. So when he talks about this kind of spills over into um, the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. So if you think about it like now, since that time, when has the nations ever said, "Let's go to Jerusalem to hear the word of the Lord"? In fact, one of the things we know now is the hatred of Israel, right? That which is always amazing me, that what we call the anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic. The point is, um, so we know that it is not today, right? Because here are the very specific things that we will look for to be able to know we're in that day. Okay. Verse 3 says, "He will settle disputes among many peoples and provide arbitration for strong nations that are far away. They will beat their swords into plows and their spears into pruning knives. Nations will not take up the sword against nation. They will never again train for war." Wow, right? We know we're not in this day. right? We know we're not in this day. Now, this is also, like I say, part of the what's called the millennial reign. And in other words, when Jesus comes back to the earth, he will set up his kingdom. And so notice during his kingdom, this justice, nonviolence, notice no wars, nations getting along with one another. So you won't have one nation trying to conquer another nation. Isn't it amazing? We have that even as we speak, right? Um, Nations and wars going at each other. He says, during this time, we will never have war again. We won't live under the threat of war. Verse 4, but each man will sit under his grapevine and under his fig tree, and with no one to frighten him. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has promised this. So this is a promise of God, the prophecy of God. And as I said, we know we don't live in this because this doesn't exist today. Verse 5, though all the people, though all the though all the peoples each walk in the name of their God, we will walk in the name of Yahweh our God forever and ever. On that day, now you kind of always see this phrase here from this perspective. On that day, why? Because that day doesn't exist during this time. It's a prophecy in the future. On that day, this is the Lord's declaration. I will assemble the lame and gather the scattered, those I have injured. I will make them I will make the lame into a remnant, those far removed into a strong nation. Then the Lord will rule over them in Mount Zion, from this time on and forever. And you, watchtower for the flock, foothill of daughter of Zion, a former rule will come to you. Sovereignty will come from daughter Jerusalem. Now, notice again that he says, um, he will gather on that day. He will gather the lame, right? Um, Notice the Lord will rule over them from Mount Zion. Look at that term right there. The Lord will rule over them. So we know this is not happening today. I tell people this, that 1947 wasn't a fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, it wasn't. And then, of course, notice during this day, when God will rule over them, all of the good things that will happen during that day. Verse 9. Now, why are you shouting loudly? Is there no king with you? Has your counselor perished, so that anguish grips you like a woman in labor? Rise and cry out, daughter Zion, like a woman in labor, for now you will leave the city and camp in the open fields. You will go to Babylon. There you will be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the power of your enemies. Now, this is kind of important prophecy here. Let me do my timeline again. This is a important prophecy here. And come on, let's see here. Now, remember, Micah's prophecy is around 735, and then the fall of Jerusalem. So it would be about 139 years, okay? 139 years, about 139 years. Notice what he says. Um, you will go to Babylon, verse 10. You will go to Babylon. So 139 years, God is speaking this. And by the way, at this time too, it is not too late for them to change. At this time, it is not too late for them to change. That time will not come. Actually, this is around King Hezekiah. His son will seal the doom. Manasseh, his son, will seal the doom. But notice he said, you will go to Babylon. Verse 11, many nations have now assembled against you and say, let her be defiled, and let us feast our eyes on Zion. But they do not know the Lord's intentions or understand his plans, that he has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. Rise and thresh, daughter Zion. I will make your horns, I will make your horns iron and your hooves bronze, so you can crush many people. Then you will set apart the plunder, and you set apart their plunder to the Lord for destruction. Their wealth to the Lord of all the earth. Now let's go to chapter 5. Now, daughter, who is under attack, you slash yourself in grief. Your seas is set against us. They are striking the judge of Israel on the cheek with a rod. In other words, they just kind of. Remember when Jesus said, if they slap you in your cheek, turn the other? So this is kind of, you get a picture of what he meant by that. It wasn't you sit there and take a beating, but it was more of an insult or a challenge, okay? Verse 2, Bethlehem, Ephrath, you are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you to be ruler over Israel for me. His origins is from antiquity, from eternity. Now, obviously, you see this great prophecy. Let me do this here. I'm going to start using this.
Ephrathah.
Ephrathah. Okay, I just want to see why. I'm not going to use all of this because, okay. Where am I then? Now, Ephrathah. Okay, Ephrathah. Okay. Now, this is a prophecy about Jesus' birth. Okay. We see this quoted in Matthew. Okay. We see this quoted in Matthew. Also Luke. Where you at, Matthew? Matthew, 2nd chapter. You know what? Let's do this. No, I won't turn there. All right, but anyway, this is a prophecy right here. And again, 730 years before Jesus is born. He says, Bethlehem, you are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you who will be ruler over Israel for me. His origin is from antiquity and from eternity. So right there, you see this prophecy about Jesus. Okay, right here, he is the. You can say the eternal God. Notice his origins is from antiquity, from eternity. It reaches back into eternity past, which is back. I often say this: we never ever should allow other people to despise prophecies. This is huge. That God speaks out and says he will prophesy, okay, 730 years before the birth of Jesus. And then also tell us who he is. Now, of course, John 1:1 tells us that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So right here is the deity of Jesus revealed. All right, verse 3. Therefore he will abandon them until the time when she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of his brothers will return to the people of Israel. He will stand and shepherd them in the strength of Yahweh, excuse me, in the majestic name of Yahweh his God. They will live securely, and from then his greatness will extend to the ends of the earth. He will be their peace when Assyria invades our land, when it marches against the fortress. We will raise against it 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. Then they will shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword, the land of Nimrod with a drawn blade. So he will rescue us from Assyria when it invades our land, when it marches against the territory. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. The land of Jacob, then the remnant of Jacob will be among many peoples, like the dew from the Lord, like showers on grass, which do not wait for anyone, linger for mankind. Then the remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, among many peoples, like lions among animals of the forest, like young lions among the flocks of the sheep, which tramples and tears as it passes through. And there is no one to rescue them. Your hand will be lifted up against your adversaries, all of your adversaries will be destroyed. In that day, this is the Lord's declaration. I will remove your horses from you and wreck your chariots. I will remove the cities of your lands and tear them down to the fortress. Verse 12, I will remove sorceries from your hand, and you will not have any fortune tellers. I will remove your carved images and sacred pillars from you, so that you will not bow down again to the work of your hands. And I will pull up the asterisk poles from among you and demolish your cities. I will take vengeance in anger and wrath against the nations that have not obeyed me. So again, here is the thing of judgment that God always says. This is what judgment will happen. They're always against unrighteousness, wickedness, and sin. Now, one of the things here, look at verse 8 again. He says, the remnant of Jacob will be among many nations, among many peoples. And one of the things that happened during the Babylonian exiles is they were scattered throughout the nations. And even after the 70-year exile, only a fraction came back. Something like 50 to 60,000 people came back. And even, you can say to this day, they're still scattered throughout many nations. During the time of Jesus, they were scattered throughout. This is why when you would see the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, you see all of these different Jews who witnessed the speaking of tongues, but these were Jews who had traveled to Jerusalem from every nation, from many nations around the Roman Empire, from different dialects. Now, in the last days, what's going to happen is that God is going to gather the elect of Israel. Okay? Listen what he says right there. The remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, among many peoples, like lions among animals of the forest, like young lion among flocks and sheep, will trample and passes through, and there is no one to rescue them. So again, you're going to see that God, again, prophecy is, and I say this too, so you can keep this in mind, that when the Bible talks about gathering his elect from the four winds, from the nations, this is we're going to see more language like this that's going to spell out that he's referring to bringing his people back into their land, as we saw in the previous chapters. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. As always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.